The sword came down in darkness. 3:47 a.m., May 11th, 1945, Luzon. The blade caught him on the side of the head, tore through skin and cartilage. His right ear severed. Blood sprayed across the tent canvas. Private John McKinney woke to searing pain and the silhouette of a man standing over him. The sword was rising again. He had less than 1 second to live. Outside his tent, 97 more Japanese soldiers were moving through the darkness. They had watched this position for days, counted the Americans, timed the guard rotations. They expected to kill everyone before sunrise. What happened in the next 36 minutes should not have been possible. A sharecropper's son from Georgia, 3rd grade education, barely literate, against 100 trained soldiers who had already killed their way through the Pacific. The official count would reach 41 dead. But the numbers don't tell you what it took, what it cost. What happens to a man when survival becomes the only mathematics that matters? This is not a story about war. This is a story about what one man did when death came for him in the dark. Dingalan Bay sits on the eastern coast of Luzon. The jungle comes right down to the water, dense, green, alive with things that bite and sting and kill. By May 1945, the Philippine campaign had consumed over 60,000 American casualties. The Japanese refused surrender. They launched night attacks, dawn raids, suicide charges against perimeters they knew they could not hold. Company A of the 123rd Infantry Regiment had established an outpost near Dingalan Bay. The position guarded a supply route. 3 men manned a light machine gun on the perimeter. McKinney had just finished his shift at that gun. He walked a few paces to his tent, lay down with his M1 rifle beside him. Always beside him. The jungle was quiet. It should not have been. Sergeant Fukutaro Mori led the vanguard. His orders were specific. Eliminate the first Americans silently. No gunfire, swords and bayonets. By the time the main force attacked, the perimeter would already be compromised. Mori reached McKinney's tent. He could hear the American breathing inside. One strike, clean, before the alarm could be raised. But in darkness, distance deceives. The blade that should have taken McKinney's head caught him on the side instead. The pain was instant, electric. His eyes opened to blood and shadow, and the certainty of death coming for the second strike. McKinney's hand found his rifle in the darkness. He did not aim. He did not think. 24 years of hunting in Georgia woods took over. 24 years of knowing that hesitation means going hungry, that mistakes have consequences, that survival is earned in split seconds. He swung the M1 like a club. The rifle butt caught Mori under the chin. Bone shattered. The sergeant staggered. McKinney swung again, harder. The second blow crushed skull. Mori dropped. Outside, McKinney heard them. Footsteps. Dozens of footsteps. Moving fast through the camp. The main assault had begun. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the night. Blood poured from his ear. His head rang from the sword strike. And somewhere in the darkness, nearly 100 Japanese soldiers were coming to kill everyone he knew. The machine gun was 30 yards from his tent. McKinney could see muzzle flashes, hear screaming, the crack of Arisaka rifles mixing with the heavier reports of M1 Garands. Japanese soldiers were pouring through the perimeter from the northeast, wave after wave. McKinney understood immediately. The machine gun was the key. It covered the main approach. If the Japanese captured it and turned it around, they could rake the entire perimeter. Every American in Company A would die. He ran toward the gun. The two soldiers who had replaced him were fighting for their lives. Private James Hendricks took a bayonet to the shoulder in the first seconds. The third man made a decision. He grabbed Hendricks and dragged him toward the rear. It was the right call. Hendricks would have bled out. But it meant the machine gun was now undefended. 10 Japanese infantrymen reached the emplacement before McKinney. They swarmed over the sandbag wall. One began turning the gun. The others provided security, rifles pointed outward. McKinney did not slow down. He did not take cover. He did not wait for backup. He sprinted directly at 10 enemy soldiers who had just captured the most important weapon in the outpost. They saw him coming, a single American, bleeding from the head, charging straight at them. Two raised their rifles. McKinney was faster. First man at 15 yards, second at 10. By the time he reached the sandbag wall, he had fired 4 rounds. 4 soldiers were down. He leaped into the emplacement. The space inside measured 8 feet by 6. 6 enemy soldiers were still alive in that confined area. Some were swinging rifles around. Others reached for bayonets. One was still fumbling with the machine gun. McKinney landed among them and kept firing. Point blank. The M1 Garand held 8 rounds. He had already fired 4. He put the next 3 into 3 more soldiers at distances measured in inches. 1 round left. The 8th man stood directly in front of him, bayonet raised. McKinney fired his last round. The soldier dropped. The M1's bolt locked back with his distinctive metallic ping. 3 Japanese soldiers were still alive in the gun pit. They heard that sound. They knew what it meant. McKinney reversed his grip before the empty clip finished ejecting. He swung the weapon like an axe. Walnut stalk connected with the first soldier's temple. The man collapsed. McKinney swung again. The second soldier tried to block. The rifle butt shattered bone and continued into his skull. The third soldier lunged with a bayonet. McKinney sidestepped, brought the rifle down on the back of the man's neck. Vertebrae cracked. 30 seconds. 10 Japanese soldiers had captured the machine gun. 30 seconds later, all 10 were dead. McKinney grabbed for the machine gun. Something was wrong. The bolt was jammed. The feed tray bent. He cycled the charging handle. Nothing. The most important weapon in the perimeter was useless. McKinney looked up. Dawn was starting to lighten the eastern horizon. In that gray light, he could see them. More Japanese soldiers, many more, regrouping at the edge of the jungle. He had an M1 rifle with an empty magazine. He had just killed 10 men in hand-to-hand combat. His ear was still bleeding, and the main assault had not even started yet. McKinney reached down, pulled a bandolier from one of the dead soldiers, American .30 caliber rounds. The man had probably taken them from a previous engagement. He loaded a fresh clip. Somewhere in the darkness, a Japanese officer was shouting orders. McKinney could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were coming again. He settled into the gun pit, among the bodies, rested his rifle on the sandbag wall, waited. The second wave emerged from the jungle 60 yards away. At least 20 soldiers in the first line, more behind them. They came at a run, rifles with fixed bayonets, screaming. McKinney put his front sight on the lead soldier and squeezed. The M1 was designed for rapid, semi-automatic fire. A trained soldier could put 8 aimed rounds downrange in under 10 seconds. McKinney was not a trained soldier. He was a hunter from Georgia who had been shooting since childhood. He was faster. First soldier at 60 yards. Second. Third. The M1 kicked against his shoulder. Brass casings ejected to his right. He did not think. His body remembered thousands of hours in Georgia woods. Lead the target. Squeeze. Acquire next. Repeat. The clip ejected with a ping. McKinney slammed in a fresh one. The charging wave had covered 20 yards during his reload. 40 yards now. He started firing again. The Japanese soldiers in the second wave had expected to find a captured machine gun, their comrades turning that gun on the sleeping Americans. Instead, they found one man with a rifle, cutting them down with mechanical precision. 8 rounds, reload. 8 rounds, reload. Some made it to within 15 yards before McKinney dropped them. Others veered left or right seeking cover. He tracked them and fired. A soldier who moved was easier to hit than a soldier who stood still. McKinney had learned that hunting deer. The second wave broke. Survivors scattered back towards the jungle. McKinney counted the bodies in front of his position. 11 more. 21 total since the attack began. He did not feel relief. Japanese officers were already reorganizing beyond the tree line. And now he heard something else. A hollow thump from somewhere in the jungle. Then another. Knee mortars. The first round exploded 10 yards to his left. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed across the gun pit. McKinney flattened against the sandbags. The second round hit closer. The third landed directly on the parapet. The Japanese had learned. They were not going to charge blindly into his rifle fire again. They would soften the position with mortars first, kill him or force him to keep his head down, then send in the infantry. McKinney understood the problem. If he stayed in the gun pit, the mortars would find him. They were adjusting with each shot, getting closer. But if he moved, he would lose the only fortified position in this section. A grenade landed 3 feet away. McKinney grabbed it and threw it back. It exploded in midair. The blast wave knocked him sideways. His ears were ringing. Blood from his severed ear had soaked through the makeshift bandage. Another mortar round hit the sandbags directly. The wall partially collapsed. McKinney was now half exposed. He made his decision. Staying meant death. He grabbed 2 bandoliers from the dead soldiers around him, slung them over his shoulder, ran. Rifle fire cracked from the tree line. Bullets snapped past his head. McKinney sprinted 15 yards to a shallow depression. Not a proper foxhole, just a slight dip in the terrain. He threw himself into it and rolled. Rounds kicked up dirt inches from his face. McKinney crawled to the edge of the depression, found a firing position. The Japanese infantry was moving again. They thought he was running. They thought he was retreating. 2 squads emerged from the jungle. Fast walk. Rifles ready. Moving toward the abandoned gun pit. McKinney let them get to 30 yards. Then he opened fire. The attackers had bunched together while crossing open ground. A mistake. First shot dropped the point man. Second hit the soldier behind. The group scattered. But there was no cover between the jungle and McKinney's new position. He picked them off as they ran. 8 rounds. Reload. The survivors reached the gun pit and found only bodies. Their comrades from the first wave. They had expected to find the American there. Instead, they found him shooting at them from a completely different angle. 3 more fell before they could locate his muzzle flash. McKinney changed position again. Moved 10 yards to his right while the Japanese reorganized. Found another depression. Started firing from the new location. He was doing what he had done in Georgia woods. Never stay in one place. Never let your target predict where the next shot comes from. A deer that hears 1 gunshot will freeze. A deer that hears 2 from different locations will run in circles. The Japanese were running in circles. Dawn light spread across the sky. McKinney had been fighting for 18 minutes. His ammunition was running low. His ear still bled. And he could see movement in the jungle that suggested the enemy was massing for another push. He needed more ammunition. He knew exactly where to find it. The dead Japanese soldiers around the gun pit carried ammunition. Not just the .30 caliber round he had already scavenged. Some had Arisaka rifles with full pouches. Others had grenades clipped to their belts. McKinney needed to get back there. He waited for a lull in mortar fire. Counted to 3. Sprinted across open ground toward the gun pit. Rifle fire erupted from the tree line. McKinney ran zigzag. A bullet tugged at his sleeve. Another cracked past his ear. He dove the last 5 feet and landed among the bodies he had created 20 minutes earlier. The smell hit him. Blood and cordite and something else. The copper tang of death. McKinney ignored it. He had butchered hogs on the farm. Gutted deer in Georgia heat. The smell was familiar. He moved quickly through the bodies. Grabbed every bandolier he could find. Every loose clip. He found 4 American ammunition pouches on men who had probably taken them as trophies. 64 more rounds. He stuffed the clips into his pockets and belt. A Japanese soldier appeared over the sandbag wall. He must have crawled forward during the ammunition gathering. His rifle was already coming up. McKinney shot him through the chest at 2 feet. He grabbed the dead man's grenades. 3 of them. Japanese Type 97 fragmentation grenades. He had never used one before, but he had seen them. Pull the pin. Strike the cap. Count to 4. Throw. Movement and peripheral vision. More soldiers approaching from the left. McKinney armed a grenade. Counted. Threw it over the sandbags. The explosion was followed by screaming. He armed the second grenade. Threw it toward the tree line where muzzle flashes were concentrated. More screaming. He was out of the gun pit before the third grenade left his hand. Running again. New position. Keep moving. The sky was light enough now to see clearly. McKinney found a shell crater 15 yards from his previous depression. Dropped into it. 3 feet deep. Enough cover to protect from direct fire. He could see the entire approach from jungle to perimeter. Bodies littered the ground. He counted quickly. 28, maybe 30. Some were still moving. Wounded men trying to crawl back. McKinney let them go. A wounded man required 2 healthy soldiers to carry. Every casualty he created multiplied the enemy's problems. The mortar fire had stopped. McKinney understood why. The Japanese had lost visual contact. Their mortar crews could not adjust fire on a target they could not see. He had 15, maybe 20 minutes before they repositioned observers. He used the time to reload every empty clip. His fingers worked automatically. Press rounds into the clip. Feel for spring tension. 8 rounds per clip. He had scavenged enough ammunition for approximately 10 reloads. 80 rounds. 80 rounds against however many Japanese soldiers were still in that jungle. The attack had lasted 23 minutes. McKinney had killed or wounded at least 30 enemy soldiers. But he knew the math was not in his favor. The Japanese had started with roughly 100 men. Even if half were down, that left 50. And he was still alone. Where was the rest of Company A? The Japanese attack had hit multiple points simultaneously. McKinney's position was on the northeast flank. Other soldiers were fighting their own battles on the south and west. The company commander was trying to organize coherent defense. But in darkness and chaos of a night attack, coordination was almost impossible. McKinney did not know any of this. He knew only that no one had come to help him. No reinforcements, no supporting fire. Just him, his rifle, and the bodies piling up in front of his position. The Japanese regrouped at the edge of the jungle. He could see them through the trees. Soldiers checking weapons. NCOs moving among ranks. Officers studying the American perimeter through binoculars. They had expected to overrun this outpost in 5 minutes. They had lost nearly a third of their force to one man in 23 minutes. And they still hadn't broken through. The officer lowered his binoculars. He saw him gesture toward a specific section. Not the gun pit. Not the craters where McKinney had been fighting. The officer was pointing at the supply tents. A different approach. A new axis of attack designed to bypass the killing ground McKinney had created. McKinney read the enemy's intention instantly. They were going to swing around his flank, hit the camp from a direction he could not cover. And there was nothing he could do to stop them from his current position. He had a choice. Stay in his crater where he had cover and clear fields of fire, or move to intercept an attack he might not reach in time. McKinney climbed out of the crater and started running toward the supply tents. 40 yards. He covered the distance in 8 seconds, threw himself behind a stack of ammunition crates just as the first Japanese soldiers emerged from the jungle on the southern approach. They had not expected him to be there. The lead element consisted of 12 soldiers moving in tactical column. They were heading for the gap between 2 tents. Once through that gap, they would be inside the perimeter with clear shots at soldiers fighting on other sections. McKinney opened fire from behind the crates. First 3 men in the column went down before the others could react. 4th and 5th tried to return fire but could not locate him in shadows between the tents. McKinney shot them both. The remaining 7 scattered. Some ran back toward the jungle, others dove for cover behind fallen logs and shallow depressions. McKinney tracked the ones who went to ground. They were pinned, unable to advance, unable to retreat without exposing themselves. He shifted his aim to the tree line. More soldiers were emerging. The Japanese commander had committed his reserve force to this flanking attack. 20 more men, maybe 25. They saw their comrades pinned down and hesitated at the edge of the jungle. That hesitation cost them. McKinney fired into the clustered soldiers. 8 rounds. Reload. 8 rounds. Bodies dropped among the trees. Survivors pulled back into deeper cover. 26 minutes into the attack, McKinney had now killed or wounded at least 35 enemy soldiers. The Japanese had tried 3 different approaches: frontal assault on the machine gun, mortar bombardment followed by infantry, flanking maneuver toward the supply area. All 3 had failed. The Japanese commander faced a problem he had never encountered. His intelligence had indicated this outpost was defended by a small American force with limited heavy weapons. Standard doctrine called for overwhelming night attacks against such positions. Speed and numbers would compensate for defensive advantages. But one man had disrupted everything. The commander did not know it was one man. His soldiers reported heavy fire from multiple positions, muzzle flashes from the machine gun pit, then from a depression 30 yards away, then from behind supply crates. It appeared the Americans had established interlocking fields of fire with several riflemen supporting each other. This assessment was wrong, but it shaped Japanese tactics for the next phase. The mortar crews repositioned to the southwest. They began dropping rounds on the supply area. McKinney heard the first impacts and moved immediately. He had learned static positions attracted mortar fire. Movement meant survival. He ran north along the inside of the perimeter, found the foxhole that had been abandoned when its occupant went to reinforce the southern defense, dropped into it. The hole was deeper than his previous positions, 4 feet down with a firing step that let him see over the lip. The Japanese infantry attacked again, this time from 2 directions simultaneously, one group from the south, another from the original northeastern approach. They were trying to split his fire, force him to choose which attack to engage. McKinney engaged both. 4 rounds at the southern group, dropped 2 men. Swung his rifle northeast. 4 rounds at that group, dropped 2 more. The M1 pinged empty. He reloaded in under 3 seconds, fired at the southern group again. The attack stalled. Neither group could advance into the withering rifle fire, but neither group retreated either. They went to ground and started returning fire. Bullets cracked over McKinney's head. Rounds thudded into the dirt around the foxhole. He was now taking fire from two directions. His ammunition was running low, and the Japanese were learning. They had figured out the fire was coming from a single location. One rifleman, not a squad, not interlocking positions, just one man who moved fast and shot accurately. This knowledge changed everything. The Japanese soldiers stopped attacking in waves. They began advancing individually. One man would move while others provided covering fire. Then another man would move, leapfrogging forward, closing the distance yard by yard. It was a tactic designed to overwhelm a single defender. Even the best marksmen could not track multiple targets moving at different times from different directions. Eventually, someone would get close enough. McKinney recognized what they were doing. He had hunted animals that used similar tactics. A pack of coyotes would spread out and approach prey from multiple angles. The prey could only watch one threat at a time. The others would close in. He was the prey now. 31 minutes. The Japanese had closed to within 20 yards on the southern approach, 15 yards on the northeast. McKinney had fewer than 30 rounds remaining. The foxhole that had protected him was about to become his grave. McKinney did not wait for them to reach him. He burst out of the foxhole and charged directly at the nearest group of Japanese soldiers. 5 men were crouched behind a fallen palm tree 15 yards to the northeast. They had been waiting for their comrades to close from the other side. They did not expect their target to attack. McKinney shot the first man while still running, shot the second as he reached the log. The third soldier rose to meet him with a bayonet thrust. McKinney sidestepped and slammed his rifle butt into the man's face. Bone crunched. The soldier went down. The fourth man swung his rifle like a club. McKinney ducked under the blow and drove the steel butt plate of his M1 into the soldier's throat. The fifth man tried to run. McKinney shot him in the back at 3 yards. He kept moving, could not stop. Stopping meant death. The southern group had seen him leave the foxhole. They were sprinting toward his position. McKinney turned and fired. 2 men dropped. Others kept coming. He fired again. Another man fell. The M1 pinged empty. 3 Japanese soldiers reached him before he could reload. The first one tackled him around the waist. McKinney went down hard. His rifle flew from his hands. The second soldier stomped on his wounded ear. Pain exploded through his skull. The third soldier raised his bayonet for a killing thrust. McKinney grabbed the ankle of the man standing on his head and twisted. The soldier lost balance and fell. McKinney rolled, throwing off the man who had tackled him. The bayonet thrust missed his chest by inches, buried itself in dirt. He scrambled to his knees, found his rifle, swung it in a wide arc that caught one soldier across the temple. The man collapsed. McKinney reversed a swing, drove the butt plate into another soldier's ribs, felt bones break under impact. The third soldier had pulled his bayonet from the ground. He lunged. McKinney blocked the thrust with his rifle barrel. The blade slid along wood and steel, gouging a furrow in the stock. McKinney stepped inside the man's reach and headbutted him. The soldier staggered. McKinney hit him twice more with the rifle butt. He stops moving. 33 minutes since the attack began. McKinney was breathing hard. His hands were slick with blood. Some of it was his. His ear was a mass of torn flesh and dried gore. His uniform was ripped in a dozen places. He had bruises and cuts he did not remember receiving. But he was still alive. He looked around the battlefield. Bodies everywhere. Japanese soldiers who had come to kill Americans and found something they had not expected. More bodies than he could count in the gray morning light. Movement to his right. 2 more soldiers emerging from the jungle. McKinney raised his rifle and realized it was empty. He had not reloaded after the hand-to-hand fighting. The 2 soldiers saw him standing among the bodies of their comrades. They hesitated. McKinney charged them. He covered 10 yards before they could react. The first soldier tried to bring his rifle up. Too slow. McKinney's rifle butt caught him under the chin. The second soldier turned to run. McKinney chased him down in 3 strides and clubbed him from behind. 34 minutes. McKinney remembered the mortar position. He had seen muzzle flashes from the southwest throughout the battle. The knee mortars had been pounding his positions. Taking those crews out would eliminate the indirect fire threat. He found a loaded rifle among the dead, an M1 with a full clip, picked it up, dropped his damaged weapon, started moving toward the mortar position. The mortar crews saw him coming. 2 men. They had been adjusting their weapon for another fire mission. Now they scrambled to defend themselves. One reached for a rifle. The other tried to arm a grenade. McKinney shot them both from 45 yards. 35 minutes. He stood in the morning light, scanning the jungle for more targets. His chest heaved. His vision was blurring from exhaustion and blood loss. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest. The jungle was quiet. No more soldiers emerging from the trees, no more mortar rounds, no more rifle fire from concealed positions. Just the moans of wounded men and the buzzing of flies already gathering on the dead. McKinney walked back toward the American perimeter. He was halfway there when he saw figures moving toward him. American uniforms, soldiers from Company A who had finally fought through to his section of the line. They stopped when they saw him, covered in blood, carrying a rifle that was not his own, surrounded by bodies. McKinney lowered his weapon. The reinforcements stared at the carnage around him, at the shattered machine gun position, at the scattered corpses stretching from jungle to perimeter. 36 minutes after Sergeant Fukutaro Mori slashed open his tent, Private John McKinney was still standing, still breathing, still in complete control of the area. The battle was over, but no one yet understood what had actually happened. The soldiers who reached McKinney that morning were from 2nd Platoon. They had been fighting on the western edge when the Japanese attack hit. It took them 36 minutes to push through. What they found defied comprehension. Bodies lay scattered across an area roughly 100 yards long and 60 yards wide. Japanese soldiers slumped over sandbags, crumpled in shell craters, sprawled among supply crates, piled on top of each other near the damaged machine gun emplacement. The platoon sergeant ordered a count. His men moved through the battlefield, checking bodies, marking positions. The count took 20 minutes. When they finished, the sergeant didn't believe the number. He ordered them to count again. 38 dead Japanese soldiers lay in the immediate vicinity of the machine gun position. 2 more bodies were found near the mortar emplacement 45 yards away. 40 confirmed kills, in a space that 1 man had defended for 36 minutes. The sergeant found McKinney sitting on an ammunition crate. The private was pressing a blood-soaked bandage against what remained of his right ear. His uniform was torn and stained. His rifle stock was cracked from repeated impacts against human skulls. He looked like a man who had walked through hell. The sergeant asked what happened. McKinney gave a brief account. The tent, the sword, the machine gun, the waves of attackers. He spoke in short sentences, no embellishment, no drama, just facts. The sergeant did not believe him. No single soldier could kill 40 men in 36 minutes. It was impossible. There must have been other defenders, other riflemen supporting McKinney's position. The private was confused from blood loss and combat stress. But the other soldiers in Company A had been accounted for. The 2 men who originally manned the machine gun with McKinney had evacuated to the rear with wounds. Everyone else had been fighting on different sections of the perimeter. The ballistic evidence supported McKinney's account. Spent M1 casings littered the ground at exactly the positions he described. The trajectory of wounds on Japanese bodies matched the firing angles from those positions. 1 man, 40 kills, 36 minutes. Company A's commanding officer forwarded a report to battalion headquarters. Battalion forwarded it to regiment. Regiment forwarded it to division. At each level, officers read the account and assumed it was exaggerated. Combat reports often inflated enemy casualties. Soldiers under stress made mistakes. The numbers had to be wrong. The 33rd Infantry Division sent an intelligence team to verify the report. They interviewed McKinney, interviewed witnesses, examined the battlefield, counted the bodies again. Some accounts suggested the actual number of Japanese dead exceeded 100, but only 40 could be directly attributed to McKinney's actions with certainty. The investigators reached an unavoidable conclusion. The report was accurate. Private John McKinney had single-handedly repelled an attack by approximately 100 Japanese soldiers. He had killed 40 of them. He had saved his company from potential annihilation. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor went forward in June 1945. The Medal of Honor is the highest military decoration awarded by the United States government. Fewer than 3,500 have been awarded since the Civil War. The criteria are specific. The recipient must have distinguished themselves conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. McKinney's actions exceeded those criteria by any reasonable measure. The recommendation moved through channels. War Department reviewers examined the evidence. They found the same thing the division investigators had found. The story was true. Every detail was supported by witness testimony and physical evidence. On January 23, 1946, Private John McKinney stood in the White House. President Harry Truman placed a Medal of Honor around his neck. The citation described his actions in formal military language: extreme gallantry, unsurpassed intrepidity, single-handedly thwarting an assault that threatened to annihilate his company. McKinney did not give speeches. He did not seek publicity. When reporters asked about the battle, he gave the same brief answers he had given the sergeant that morning on Luzon. John McKinney returned to Screven County, Georgia in 1946. He went back to the only life he knew: farming, hunting, fishing in the same creeks where he had learned to shoot as a boy. He rarely spoke about the war. Neighbors knew he had received the Medal of Honor. They had seen the newspaper articles. But McKinney never brought it up, never displayed the medal, never attended reunions or gave interviews. When people asked about Luzon, he would say a few words and then change the subject. The nightmares were a different matter. His family knew about those. The sounds he made in his sleep. The way he would wake suddenly, reaching for a rifle that was not there. The war had followed him home in ways that no medal could address. McKinney did what most veterans of his generation did. He buried the memories and kept working. He married, raised a family, worked various jobs around Screven County. The years passed. Korea came and went. Vietnam came and went. New wars created new heroes and new veterans with their own buried memories. McKinney remained in Georgia, quietly living, quietly aging. The Medal of Honor sat in a drawer somewhere. He had earned the nation's highest military decoration, and most of his neighbors had no idea. McKinney died on April 5, 1997, in Sylvania, Georgia. He was 76 years old. The sharecropper's son, who killed 40 Japanese soldiers with a rifle and his bare hands, passed away quietly, surrounded by family. He was buried in Screven County, not far from the land where he had learned to hunt. 20 years after his death, Georgia honored him again. In 2017, the state legislature voted to rename a section of highway in Screven County. It became the John R. McKinney Medal of Honor Highway. A ceremony was held. Veterans attended. The McKinney family accepted the honor on behalf of a man who had never sought recognition for what he did. The highway sign stands today. Drivers pass it without knowing the story behind the name. They do not know about the tent and the sword. They do not know about the machine gun and the 36 minutes. They do not know that the quiet farmer who once lived nearby had saved an entire company through an act of violence and courage that still defies belief. 40 men in 36 minutes. One rifle, one soldier, one morning in the Philippines that should have ended in massacre, but ended in something else entirely. Private John McKinney never asked to be a hero. He was a farm boy who joined the army because there was a war. He did what he had to do to survive and to protect the men sleeping around him. Then he went home and tried to live a normal life. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. We bring back the moments history almost erased.